Hey everybody, and welcome to DC Fine Art. Today we'll be working with Sofft Pastel and doing a super bright um, piece that will be perfect for spring or summer. It's just something loose, something easy, and I'm not using a lot of my pastel pencils. I do use them here and there to give me a little bit of detail in some finer areas, but other than that, I'm sticking with my pan pastels, and I'm sticking with those soft pastel sticks that are more chunky, like some of the Unisons, or I do have some of the Richardsons. I use the Richardsons and Townsends, but anyways, this will be more of a painting that's just kind of looser, kind of fun, and super bright for spring and summer. So I think it'll be perfect. So I'll be working on the background for like a honeycomb beehive background, and the sunflower, well, of course, it's going to be big, bright, bold, and then working on like a little bee, and there'll be a bear. Now the bear is going to be on the next video since I didn't have enough time to actually fit him in. He will be on the next video, and it should be one other video on this one. And yeah, it'll be a finished piece. But yeah, let's go ahead and jump into the video and have some fun with this beehive and sunflower. Alright, so here I've got it in fast mode, of course, but I am using my like gum eraser or my tacky eraser to go ahead and just roll it, kind of like you're rolling dough. And what I'm doing here is just kind of getting my pencil lead off of the paper. So I kind of sketched out my design on what I wanted to do. I got a sunflower and some honeycomb shapes, which is just like kind of like little hexagons everywhere. But I went ahead and just rolled it in a little ball, and then I would roll it like kind of like if you're just rolling it like dough across there, and it just takes off enough of the graphite to where your soft pastel can stick, and you can still see where you had drawn or where your graphite lines would be, but you just don't have that shiny graphite that soft pastel doesn't like to stick to. So if you don't want that graphite showing through, you definitely want to use that sticky eraser or gum eraser to be able to get it off. Kneaded eraser. I should know my words a little bit better by now, right? So anyways, here I am using my Sofft tool, and it's spelled S-O-F-F-T. They're Sofft tools. This here is a little extension tool, and it's got the little tip on it to where I can hold it further back instead of up close. And I'm using that to just dip into my burnt sienna. I think this is, I use burnt sienna and burnt sienna shade. And I'm just kind of going around, seeing my little hexagon like shapes and just filling them in. If you cannot see the graphite lines and it's just kind of faded away a little bit too much, don't worry about it. I mean, they're little hexagons, so just kind of put them in wherever you want them, basically. So I even added in some because I didn't even draw all of the hexagons on there. But it was a really simple kind of thing to do, and when you put them all together, it definitely turns out looking like a little beehive or a honeycomb in the background. Not a beehive, I guess a honeycomb. So here I am using my burnt sienna or my burnt sienna shade. I know one's darker than the other. I should actually look at it to see which one it is. Let's see here. Okay, so the burnt sienna and the soft pastels is the darker one. And the burnt sienna, burnt sienna and burnt sienna shade is the darker one. And then you got the burnt sienna, which is more the lighter one. So I went with burnt sienna shade on the top, burnt sienna shade on the bottom, and now I'm putting in like a raw umber to kind of tint in the middle to where it's kind of darker, and that way it gets a little bit of a depth kind of look, like you're kind of looking into it. It gets a little darker the further, like the deeper it goes. So I put a little bit of that in there. Now I'm kind of going back through, and I'm actually using my yellow think it's like Dairy Light. It's called like Dairy Light Shade and Dairy Light. They're a type of yellow, and I'm just using basically a square edge soft tool just to kind of make some lines, kind of fill in around those little hexagon shapes. And some of them I even make kind of like a straight line. Just use the very end of it and just make those little straight lines, making the around the little holes of the honeycomb. I think I'm saying a lot of uhs now. I can't get my words out today. So yeah, here I am just kind of making little marks, kind of using the edge or the very fine tip of it, or not really a fine tip, but it's like a square, and I'm just using that to go around. Now, I'm not filling in to where the paper, you can't see the paper in there. There is some of the paper kind of showing through, but what that does is it also helps to add a little bit of depth to it, adding a little bit of multiple color in there, and that's perfectly fine. It did not look bad at all, just having a little bit of that paper show through. And also the paper that I'm using is the Pastel Matte. I absolutely love Pastel Matte by Clairefontaine for doing soft pastels. So absolutely love that color. See, I thought there should be a little honeycomb right there, so I kind of stuck one in. But here I am just kind of going around it. I'm using my darker shade of yellow though on the top because I want it to be more shadowed up in the top, and then as it comes down kind of gets a little brighter. Of course, this is going to be a very bright piece. It's just a loose, fun piece that I decided to do. And I definitely wanted it to be very bright and vibrant, kind of bringing in that happiness of coming into spring and then summer. So, but I love using these little soft tools because you can actually use different shapes. They got rounded little like pastel tools, or the soft pastel tools, and they have the square one, they have another one that's really pointed, and then they got another one that kind of looks, I don't know, it looks similar to like a little foot on a mannequin, like one of those little dolls, like it looks like a little shoe or something. It's like a shoe shape. But here I am going in now. I'm changing the color, so I went from a little bit darker yellow, and now I'm going to a brighter, more like a brighter yellow or a lighter yellow. It still has a lot of richness to it. It's very bright and vibrant, but as it comes down, you see it gets a little brighter. Just kind of going around using the tip of my soft tool, and that's spelled S-O-F-F-T. There's 2 F's in it for soft. Love these tools. They are amazing. So here I'm kind of adding it in a little bit as it goes up because I want it to kind of blend in a little bit. Go from bright to dark, or a little darker yellow. I've seen some areas that needed a little blending in there. And then I'm going to come back in and I'm going to do it again, but I'm going to do it with a little bit lighter yellow, like more of a highlight, like if the sun's kind of glistening off of it and you got that brighter color in there. And I'm going to start from the bottom, and I'm actually going to go up toward the top. So that's probably what I'm doing right now, is just looking for that yellow, or at least a brighter yellow. So here I am kind of putting in little highlights around here with a little bit brighter yellow, so that way it kind of stands out like if the sun was kind of shining on it, and it really makes it pop by doing this. It really gives it more of a three-dimensional look by doing this. And it's very easy. I mean, I'm just kind of doing the same thing, just kind of adding them in on places, but not all over the place, but not completely around it, but definitely going in and around some of the areas where the sunlight would probably be hitting on the honeycomb. So I work my way from dark to light on this. Light as the highlight being the last part. Adding a little bit more highlight in there. Now here I'm just cleaning off my Soft Pastel. It's the Townsend tarranges. You know, it's the one that if you break it, it goes into a million pieces all over the place. Yeah, but very, very rich, vibrant color. These pastels are awesome. They are a little bit pricey on the higher end, but just getting some colors that you like and just a couple of them definitely helps out. They are really, really nice and rich. Now here I'm using my soft tool to kind of blend it out, kind of blend it into there because I want more of an orangey, reddish, yellowish kind of sunflower. So it's definitely going to be bright. Here I'm using my soft tool, and if you see me taking the rag, that was because I wanted to take some of that pastel and kind of rub it into it a little bit harder and to take some of the excess off. I went ahead and got some of my soft pastel pencils, which I said I wasn't going to use really on this piece except for like the smaller details. But I also wanted to show you too, when you put a lot of the soft pastel sticks on and you try and use your pencils over the top of it, you have a little bit of an issue with your pencil wanting to work and go over the top of it. Now go around the edges of it to make the shadow, but going over the top of it is really, really hard because it doesn't really like to work with a thick layer underneath. Even if you use some of the softer pastels, pencils, I've tried my Derwent right there, soft pastels. Those are a little bit more softer of a pastel, or using some of the Caran d'Ache soft pastels are a softer type of pastel too. And it still didn't want to really layer that good on top of what I've already put down because there's already so much pigment on the paper. It doesn't usually like to take that much pastel from the pastel pencils. So that was the reason why I decided, no, I don't really want to do that anyway. I don't really want that much detail. But that right there just kind of showed you that it didn't really do that much. So I'm taking out my actual soft pastel sticks and I will be going over it. And you can definitely tell the difference how I can actually add more to it, like a bright highlight. I could put things on top of it and it definitely shows. It shows so much more. See how I use that pastel stick? Now I'm turning it more of a darker yellow. So those are the way to go. You can use both. You just have to make sure that you put down a fine layer with a stick, like a soft pastel stick. I wouldn't put on too much pigment on your paper, but I would just do a light coating of it, and then I would work it into your soft pastel paper with like a paper stump or some sort of like blending tool where you can actually push it into the paper more and have a fine layer. And I mean that, a very fine layer. And then you can actually work on top of it with your pastel pencils. But if you put too much pastel down and it's kind of thicker, then you're not going to be getting that much pastel off of your pencils. It's going to look like it's going to scratch your paper or take off the soft pastel that you already have down, just because of how much soft pastel came off of those pastel sticks. So that's another thing to keep in mind when working with soft pastels. Because these soft pastel sticks definitely put on a lot of layer. They put on a lot of pigment on that paper. So it's very thick. So you just want to do a light coating and then work it into your paper if you're wanting to use the soft pastel pencils. But this piece here, like I said, I wanted it more loose and fun and very vibrant. So here I am with my yellow out of the tarranges by Townsend. Really love how the richness of these colors are. They're just very, very vibrant. They're very beautiful. I love them. Just kind of blending it in because I want a little bit more of an orangey glow to it. And then I'll add more yellow back in. A little bit of brown around the outside of the edge, just kind of add some shadows. And there, I'm just kind of barely blending it, just a little bit here and there. and I work with it until it looks good. Now I did use some of my pastel pencils right around the edges where it's kind of thinned out. I might take my pastel pencil and just kind of create more of a shadow around the edge of the flower. I have done that. Now I'm adding some more colors in there. This is actually going to be a little bit brighter. It's going to have a lot more reds. At least as I work my way around it. There I'm kind of adding in an even brighter red to it. So I'm definitely brightening it up. So if you have a lot of oranges, or you want that pop in your room to where you want it to have like it stand out, or you got a lot of oranges and yellows and stuff, this is definitely a perfect piece for that type of room. It will definitely pop. Now you see me with, you probably didn't see it, it was really quick, but you might end up seeing me do it again. I used my airbrush, and if you're wondering why I took my airbrush out there for just a quick second, I've been doing that because instead of blowing on my paper and just like blowing it off with, you know, me blowing on it, I took my airbrush and just went ahead and just blew it with air. So in order for me to get some of that excess pastel that maybe fell onto the top of the paper, instead of rubbing it or blowing on it and, you know, spitting on it by accident, I just used my airbrush and just puffed some air on it, and yeah, it got rid of all the pastel little powders. So now here I am with my pastel pencil. I'm just basically outlining this little bee that's going to be there. He's not really my focus, you know, on the attention of it. He's just going to be a little bee. There ain't going to be much to him, but he's going to be there. He's got to be there. I mean, there's a honeycomb and a sunflower. I mean, you got to have a bee. So I'm just working from light to dark on this piece. So it starts out with the yellow leaves, of course. I start out with a mid-tone of a yellow, which is that yellow tarranges. And then I work from there and go down. Or not really go down. Well, I do go down. But I work from like that yellow, and then sometimes I might put a little bit more darker yellow in. But usually I like to make it brighter for the last. So I kind of darken it up, and then I lighten it a little bit at the end. Because you can always put your darks back in. That's no big deal. But definitely, you know, you can't really go too lighter if you already go too light to begin with. I mean, usually I like to go dark to light with soft pastels. Now here one, I kind of sped this up a little bit, but just going over the same kind of technique, starting out with some of the yellows, and this here I'm kind of making it a little bit more orange, like leaning toward more of an orangey yellowish color as I'm going toward the bear's head, like looping around. because that's where most of the sunlight was shining anyway, or at least on this side. So the sunflowers are going to be a little bit brighter, a little bit more yellow and orange tones. As it goes up and around, it starts to turn more of a reddish color, and you got more of those reds in there. So that's just how I thought about doing it. I mean, I did have a reference photo for this, but yeah, I didn't really follow it completely, because in the sunflower in my reference photo, it didn't go completely around. It was like a whole bunch of the flowers, like petals, were missing, and it just had like partial petals, and it was cut off by the photograph. So I went ahead and just made up my own flower petals, and yeah, just went around with it. Making some shadows in there and using my pastel pencils for this. So just kind of outlining some of those shadows with a brown, maybe some lighter browns in there too. But I didn't want to use too much of the like actual pencils for doing like any real big areas. Just here and there. Blending out that tip with some of my soft tools. And I didn't make these as, you know, detailed as far as like everything had to be smoothed out, everything had to be perfect, everything has to be exactly like so realistic. You know, I wasn't really worried about that. I just was worried about just having those colors the right way. Like, I didn't want them looking just kind of, you know, weird looking. I don't know. I was just really focusing on my colors. I was wanting to get those blends and those yellows and those oranges coming through. And that was really my main focus in doing this. Was just getting those tones and making it blend out in more of a softer tone, instead of being like yellow and orange and it just, or yellow and red or orange, and it just end up being cut out, like looking like candy corn. You know, I didn't want that feeling of looking at candy corn. So I definitely wanted my colors to kind of blend with each other, kind of blend into each other from dark to light. And so I definitely did a lot of layering, a lot of adding different colors with the soft pastel. Here I'm just kind of going in, add a little bit of these rustic kind of tones to it, giving a little bit more color to the sunflower leaves. And that was my airbrush again. Just blowing off some of that excess soft pastel that had fallen. Now I'm going to go ahead and do the inside part of this sunflower. Now I'm using, again, I am using my pan pastels with my soft tool, and I'm using the raw umber. So I'm using the raw umber here just to kind of outline around the bear's mouth, around the bear's nose, and I'm just using it to give myself some sort of underpainting to it. But I want it light enough to where if I go on top of it, it'll stick to it. So I didn't want to put too much soft pastel down to where whenever I start layering it with others, it would just be too thick and, you know, and it wouldn't stick out or show out much. So now here I am with some more of my yellow. This yellow here is from the Richardson, so Jack Richardson. They're the handmade soft pastels. And then I ended up using that one there, which is one of my new ones. It's the Great Americans Artworks. I only have one of those soft pastels. So I tried out in one of my videos, earlier videos, I tried out a whole bunch of different brands of soft pastels. And yeah, that was one of them. So here I ended up taking one of my soft pastels. It almost looks black, but it's not. It's a really, really dark brown. And it's also from the Jack Richardson soft pastels. Handmade. Or hand-rolled soft pastels. They're a lot softer. So it definitely lays down a lot of pigment on the paper. It's very easy to do that. So working in my yellows in between those darker areas, because I had to put those darker areas in there. And then I'll end up going back over it, adding in some of my light highlights in there, because you got to have your highlights. Now here I'm going to be working on the bee. Now I did do some adjustments on the bee, you know, because this bee is not supposed to like be the main focus of attention is the bee, but the bear is supposed to be like my main focus is him. So I am using on this my pastel pencils. So here's where you're going to see me use it, because the bee is so small, or at least it's smaller, and there is a lot of detail in him. So using the soft pastel pencils really does help for adding in small areas or areas that might need a little bit more detail, because you can get them to a really sharp point. It doesn't mean though that you can't get small details using soft pastels. There is a way, and that way is by, you know, using the edge of your soft pastel. If your soft pastel is still rounded, then you may have to break your soft pastel. I know it's like, what? I don't want to break it. But in order to get a sharp edge to create really fine detail, you're going to have to take one that's either broken or one that you're just going to have to snap in half. And I know it breaks all our hearts, but that's just the way of how it is. You would have to break it. And then you can use the sharp edges of that broken piece to get your fine details. So there is a way with soft pastels. And I guess I could have done it with this, but I just really wanted to take out and just use my pastel pencils. That way I could just quickly kind of get it done as far as the little bee goes. And I had to make some adjustments, especially to, I think it was like his top wing. I wasn't really extremely happy with his top wing, so I had to do some little adjustments there. I just didn't, and I would take my eraser right there, and what I'm doing is basically removing some of the pigment. Removing some of that pigment, and then I'm able to go on top with my pencil. But if it's too thick of a pigment, then it's really hard to make that pencil go on top of it. There's just too much soft pastel underneath. Well, I hope you guys enjoyed this video. If you're new, please click the subscribe button. And if you're already subscribed, boy, I can't get that word out today. Wow, it's another one. Yeah, if you're already subscribed, definitely hit the like button. That definitely helps the channel, helps put the channel out there, so that way we can grow. And yeah, definitely like those likes. And this pretty much sums up this piece, and the next piece, or the next part should I say, we'll be doing the bear. So super excited about doing the bear. He's a lot of fun. He's our main focal point on this. So I hope you guys enjoyed this, and I'll see you all next week. Bye, you guys.